Nobody saw this quietly becoming a full-blown crisis until it was already too late. A team that's been Missouri's crown jewel since the 1960s is about to cross a state line, and the ripple effects are going to be enormous. This isn't just about a shiny new building. It's about identity, tax dollars, civic pride, and a 50-year relationship that now faces an awkward ending. For fans who grew up with Arrowhead as a cathedral, the roar, the tailgates, the corner of the Truman Sports Complex that felt permanent, the stakes feel almost personal. For two state governments, it's finance, leverage, and a bid for national spotlight. For the Chiefs, it's a business decision with cultural weight. For weeks, there was a tug of war. Elected leaders and business types in both Kansas and Missouri laid out competing offers. Local votes, legislative committees, and the blunt force of public incentives shaped every move. At times it felt like a chess match behind closed doors, and at other times it felt like a very public argument with millions of people watching. But here's the piece you're going to want me to save for later. There was a single lever that changed everything. It's the reason this story didn't end in a renovation and instead grew into a full-blown relocation plan. I'll explain exactly how that worked after we walk through how we got here, because the timeline matters, and the consequences are what make this one more than just a stadium story. You already know Arrowhead's history. Home since 1972, part of the Truman Sports Complex along Kauffman Stadium, a place that's been woven into the region's identity. You also know why the Chiefs wanted options. Stadiums age, menus change, revenue streams shift, and the NFL is increasingly focused on year-round, multi-event venues. But what actually pushed this from talk to decision was money, structured in a way Missouri simply didn't match. Kansas put forward a plan that leaned heavily on star bonds, a financing tool Kansas has used before for big developments, and that proposal covered a much larger share of the project than Missouri's counteroffer. That math, not sentiment, ultimately did the heavy lifting. Kansas Department of Commerce offers, here's the partial reveal before the full one. Negotiations weren't happening in public for most of the year. Voters in Jackson County rejected a sales tax extension that would have helped fund Arrowhead improvements, and after that failure, the conversations shifted. Kansas pushed harder, offering to back a development package that would create an entertainment district, training facilities, and the kind of mixed-use real estate that turns a stadium into a destination. Missouri lawmakers had their own package, but in the end, the scale and structure from the Kansas side changed the stakes. Kansas City now, here's the key moment. The Chiefs in Kansas announced an agreement to build a domed, state-of-the-art stadium in Wyandotte County, a project targeted to open for the 2031 NFL season, with the construction plan centered on a roughly $3 billion price tag for the stadium itself and a broader development plan north of that. The deal also includes a new team headquarters and training facility in Olathe, pushing total development in the state toward a multi-billion-dollar figure. The Kansas Legislative Coordinating Council approved the star bond approach that will fund a major portion of the project. Kansas City Chiefs. Let that land for a second. The Chiefs' lease at Arrowhead runs through the 2030 season. That was always the bookend. But what changed was the commitment. Kansas will host Chiefs football beginning with the 2031 season under this agreement. The team's leadership framed it as a once-in-a-generation opportunity to build an enclosed, multi-use venue that could host a Super Bowl, Final Four games, and a calendar full of events that Arrowhead's open-air configuration can't reliably support. For the NFL and the franchise, the upside is huge. KCUR, okay? So what does this actually mean for people who care about the Chiefs, Kansas City, and the broader region? Economically, Kansas is betting big. Star bonds are designed to capture and redirect sales tax revenue generated inside a specially designated district to pay off project bonds. Kansas officials say the plan would cover roughly 60% of the stadium costs through these incentives, a public-private split that puts significant public backing behind the project. That math convinced the team that Kansas offered a clearer path to the kind of facility they want. Kansas Department of Commerce, politically and culturally, this will sting in Missouri. Jackson County leaders and many local fans see Arrowhead as uniquely Missouri. The thought of losing the Chiefs feels like losing a civic anchor. Local officials have already expressed public disappointment and concern about what losing the team, even if it stays within the metro area, and it does to the identity and future plans of the Truman Sports Complex, which was built to host both the Chiefs and Royals side by side. The Royals situation suddenly becomes even more complicated. If the Chiefs move across the state line, the Royals face renewed pressure to find their own long-term plan, possibly outside Jackson County as well. Kansas City. From a practical standpoint, the move isn't immediate, and that matters. Arrowhead isn't being abandoned tomorrow. The plan lines up to move starting with the 2031 season, giving a decade for planning, construction, and for Missouri to consider next steps. But not immediate doesn't equal not consequential. The economic activity generated by stadium operations, ancillary businesses, and long-term investments will shift west across the line into Wyandotte County and Olathe. Job creation, retail, hotels, all will be tied to the new district. Kansas is making a bet that those dollars are worth the public commitment. Kansas Department of Commerce. There are also strategic wins for the Chiefs themselves. A domed stadium expands the kinds of events the franchise can host. It opens new revenue channels, and it positions the team to be a more central player in future NFL and NCAA event bidding. For ownership, it's an upgrade that aligns with what other top franchises have done. Build a venue that's an asset year-round, not just on Sundays. But the moral and emotional questions linger. What does it mean when a team leaves the state where it built its local mythos? Can a new stadium replicate Arrowhead's atmosphere? Can an industrial and entertainment district create the same kind of organic, fan-driven culture that grew up around tailgates and decades of history? Missouri's leaders argue you can't replicate Arrowhead's unique feel. Kansas leaders argue the economic upside and modern facilities are worth the trade. Both positions have merit. So what should we watch next? Watch the Royals. Their lease situation and funding options suddenly feel more urgent. Watch Kansas and Jackson County negotiations over land use, mitigation, and the political fallout. Watch the exact terms of the star bond districts as they're finalized. Those define how much public exposure each state carries. And watch how the fan base reacts. Will loyalty follow the arrow across the river, or will identity anchors remain stubbornly tied to Missouri? This was never just a stadium decision. It was a choice about where a region wants to place its bets for the next generation. The Chiefs chose a path that favors a long-term, revenue-driving model. Now the real test begins. Can Kansas deliver the political stability and construction momentum to make 2031 a reality? And can Missouri find a way to keep its sporting soul intact when the dust settles? Which matters more in the end, the roar of a historic concrete bowl or the promise of a new, climate-controlled cathedral that could win national events and dollars? The answer will shape Kansas City for decades.